Hello, I'm Charlotte. You are watching The Ugly Atheist. Today's episode, I want to discuss a relatively new discovery regarding brain physiology. There is a recent discovery we've already known regarding brain anatomy, that there are at least 2 or 3 layers of membrane that surround the brain and kind of cushion it from the skull, the bony plates of the skull. And there is a new layer that was discovered sort of sandwiched in between the layers that we knew about. And it is called the subarachnoid lymphatic membrane, or acronym is SLYM or SLIM. And this is sort of acts as an additional cushion, but it is sort of 2 membranes that are linked together. So to give you an idea of what this organ looks like, imagine yourself in a giant empty warehouse where you see there's sort of a top, the roof, and then there's the floor, and then there's all the support structures, support pillars that hold up the roof, and every 100 feet or so. And that's sort of what it's like inside this membrane. There's scaffolding that sort of holds the top and bottom of this structure together, but inside is not empty like a warehouse would be. It's filled with cerebrospinal fluid. And the cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid that is the brain creates, pulling from our plasma, from our blood. 2 main purposes for the subarachnoid lymphatic membrane. One is to add additional cushion to keep the brain itself from making contact with the bony plates of the inner skull, the cranial cavity. And the other is to serve as a highly selective permeable membrane that allows in small molecules but is able to exclude many proteins. There are people who've had leaks in their brain cavity where the cerebral spinal fluid has leaked out and even come out their nostrils. So some people think they have perpetual allergies, and the doctors found that it was a leaky brain, as it were. This leads me to sort of a hypothesis that I was pondering, because so what cerebral spinal fluid is responsible for is it sort of bathes your brain, and it does so constantly, but they say that it is particularly cleansing and active at night while you're sleeping. What I was noticing regarding this whole system, fluid, and how the brain uses it, but this raised a question for me, because I didn't see in our brain any kind of mechanism that could pump this fluid throughout. I know that the brain creates the fluid in the inner chambers, in the canals, pulling from the plasma from our blood rather. But other than just that creation or origination process, there isn't really anything that directs the flow of this fluid, or other than just the creation point and the exit point, where the excess fluid sort of seeps out into the bloodstream and is carried away with the waste that it accumulates as it's cleansing your brain. And so that made me think that perhaps this is where dreams come into play. When you are dreaming, your brain is active all throughout the day, of course, and you have multiple neuronal firings and activity going on throughout the day, and that creates waste. Your cells, eat the glucose and do work and then excrete the waste product that the cerebrospinal fluid has to wash away. But at night, when your brain is largely significantly less active than when you're awake, it's always active though. And my hypothesis is that this is what dreams are, where the purpose of dreams, rather, your brain fires certain parts of itself that were active during the day and that had produced a particularly large amount of waste. So it refires. It's kind of like a recap of all the different emotions you had throughout the day or recently. And it's those extra neuronal firings that create flow in the cerebrospinal fluid. And to give you an idea of what I mean, imagine that you have a column, like a long tube column of fluid, and if you're trying to get fluid to move from one side to the other, and you add electrical current or sparks of heat on one end, that creates a temperature differentiation, and that temperature differentiation is what could be causing the flow, for the fluid to flow. And as the cerebrospinal fluid is heated up in the areas where your brain most needs it to be, then it creates that automatic flow to exit, or it expands in the heated parts and pushes out the any of the waste products to the cooler parts, and then that gets continues the flow out of the brain cavity and into your bloodstream, where it gets filtered through your kidneys, I imagine, and then out as urine. Wouldn't that be interesting if our dreams are nothing more than a fluid dynamic or fluid propulsion system to help cleanse our brain? And that might also explain, if this hypothesis has any merit or is possibly true, it might explain why our dreams tend to be sort of exaggerations of things that have happened to us in real life. Like the emotions that you feel in your dreams are often a little bit more severe or accentuated or exaggerated than what you felt perhaps in real life. And that might be to elicit greater neuronal activity to help increase the temperature differentiation, and therefore more forcefully clean your brain, sort of like turning the volume, the pressure up on a hose a little bit. Because the brain doesn't have any kind of heart or pumping mechanism like our circulatory system has. So dreams might be the brain's heart, that might serve as the brain's heart. If our brain is particularly metabolic and particularly dirty, if you will, like a lot of waste is being produced and it's not being cleaned out as often as it should, then that might be a situation where your brain will start to give you nightmares to create sort of an even more drastic temperature differentiation in the cerebrospinal fluid, and make it's sort of like turning on a fire hose in terms of of your brain's cleaning itself. And I thought, okay, if my hypothesis is true, then we might see that a particularly problematic metabolism in a brain might result in greater amounts of nightmares. And I came across this article from eClinical Medicine Journal. It showed that people who are who end up getting dementia or Alzheimer's, one of the early symptoms is that in their midlife, they start having frequent nightmares. And I don't mean just frustrating dreams, but the kind of nightmares that wake you up at night that are sort of startling, extra emotional or extra frightening. So that would be something that might support a hypothesis like the one I'm proposing. They did, however, find that using medication to stifle these nightmares did tend to reduce has a preventative effect on the development of dementia later in life. And there's some other additional facts about nightmares and dementia. It says the connection between nightmares and future dementia was much stronger for men than for women. First of all, let me say I'm not in the medical field and I'm not a physician. I'm not trained medically. So any continued research that I do in this area is going to be basically starting from ground zero. There's a lot of literature to read regarding dreams and what they do to the brain. This is just my preliminary hypothesis. It has at least that one study that might indicate that there's something to my hypothesis, but I don't know. And it could very well be that I'm way off base on this because I am coming from a place of absolute ignorance, and it just, to me, seemed like something that's plausible, but who knows? If I ever get a chance to talk to a real neurologist and cognitive scientist, I would welcome that opportunity. And so I'll continue looking into this. At the very least, just an interesting thought that maybe your dreams are just your brain's circulatory system. It's your brain's heart and the way your brain moves cerebral spinal fluid around and creates a pressure force that is for cleaning purposes and brain health, overall brain health. I did hear a while ago that people who are in the early stages of dementia stop dreaming or something to that effect. I don't know how accurate that is. Again, I'm not a physician, so take that information with a grain of salt. If you're somebody who doesn't dream very much, or if you're someone who is having those kinds of horrible nightmares that wake you up in the night a couple times a week at least, then I would see your doctor and talk to them about potential dementia and see what the professionals have to say, because I'm not a professional. Anyway, that's going to be the episode for today. And I know this particular episode doesn't have much to do with atheism, but it does have to do with scientific discoveries and the fact that dreams are still mystifying to us, but we ought not jump to any erroneous conclusions regarding dreams, like if they have meanings that are supernatural or spiritual in nature. I think the deeper meanings that dreams can be interpreted, if at all, it would just be kind of your emotional state and what it reveals about your inner dialogue and your fears and concerns in life, and anything that you're guilty about, feeling guilty over. Those kinds of things that are just normal human conditions. So I will leave it there. My name is Charlotte. You are watching The Ugly Atheist. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next Sunday.